Hey, Chris, thanks for giving me this opportunity to share. So, as they mentioned, Chris and I have been friends for a really long time. When I was in high school, I had a gal. I graduated in 1984, just to show you how young I am. I had a gal friend in high school that I asked her what she's going to do after graduation. She says, "I'm going to go to college." Well, how can you afford that? She said, "Well, every time I got babysitting money, I'd go to the coin store down the street and I'd buy a silver coin." And she started stacking this silver, and by the time we graduated in 1984, she had over $20,000 worth of savings in silver, and that always made an impact on me. And so throughout my life, I always thought, I needed to just follow up on that idea. And then the economy's been pretty good. It took a little trip in 2008 through 2011. That got me starting thinking about it again. And then recently, um, about 3 years ago, I started thinking really seriously about it, because now I had teenager or adult kids that were moving out, and I thought, I want to be able to take care of myself. I want to be able to pass down some of the things that I've accumulated to them. And so I started looking into it. One of the first ads I heard was the typical radio ads and news ads. So I called that company, and I did a little investigation, and found out that really they wanted a huge amount of money to be able to start my investment. And then they were going to keep all that money someplace else. It wasn't even with them. That precious metal, the silver and gold, was going to go. I had to pay somebody to be able to keep it for me, which I didn't mind so much. But the fact that I was buying it from one person and I never got to see it, and they were shipping it to somebody else I didn't know either, it felt uncomfortable to me. Plus the minimum amount, I still had car payments. I had kids going to college, so I couldn't afford something like that. So I started looking around, comparing all the prices, and I thought maybe I'll do what's smart. I'll just buy a couple coins a month. And about that same time, Chris introduced me to 7K, and I already checked all the prices, so I knew what the prices were across the market for JM Bullion and Monex and a lot of these other places. Um, and so when I saw the prices that for the 7K bullion, it blew me away. And I thought, the price of the membership, with just the little I wanted to buy, I could pay back my membership in a couple months and save that much money without all the other benefits that came with it. So I signed up for 7K. I started accumulating, maybe 10th ounce. Every now and then I'd get maybe a couple silver eagles. And then when I got more and more excited about it, I thought, um, I started paying off cars. I started paying off credit cards, and I started accumulating more. And so then I started buying them in tubes. Every couple months I'd buy a whole tube of coins. And this is back when silver was $14 an ounce, 2.5, 3 years ago. And then so then I got up to 10th ounce. Chris and Joe talked about these little guys. I think I paid when I was in paying 130 a piece. Now they're 230, $220 a piece for these guys. And in the middle of COVID, they're worth a lot more. So you can see that as the dollar's crashing, like Chris was talking about early, the value of the paper dollar compared to real money. You don't have to worry about this stuff going bankrupt. You don't have to worry about this stuff burning up in a fire. At worst case, it would melt in your safe and leave you a big puddle of gold on the bottom that's still worth what you paid for it, and then some. So that's the beauty of it. And it can't go bankrupt like if you invest in a company through stocks. And then eventually, because I got out of debt, and the things that 7K, the principle of investing a little bit each month, taught me and helped me get out of debt, I started buying. I bought one of these, and then so really I'm set up now so that when COVID came along, because of the precious metals that I own, I wasn't bothered at all with the prospects of maybe being out of work 6 months for a year, because I had accumulated enough that when the dollar started crashing, the price of the precious metals was going to continue to increase. And that got me more and more excited. So when other people were running around pulling their hair out like they were on fire, I was like, hey, it's going to be comfortable and I know what I can do. If I don't end up needing the precious metals, which we'll talk about in just a minute, I was saving for 4 reasons. We'll talk about those reasons. But just real quick, I wanted to show Chris and Joe my kookaburra. They talk about coin collecting. When I joined 7K, I just wanted to buy the bullion. Chris said, hey, Vince, you're making the $1 million mistake if you don't get that silver eagle every month and start collecting collectible coins. And he couldn't convince me. A lot of people you can't convince. I didn't do due diligence and do the research. But a year later, I saw that Chris was living high on the hog with all this extra money he was making, and he sold his other businesses. And I was like, okay, let me find out what I can do if this is real. And when I learned out how much he was making, I was like, okay, what do I need to do? He said, well, first of all, you need to be on the coin of the month, because that's the $1 million mistake. So I put my wife on the Silver Eagle, and then I put myself, and I said, what else do I need to do to start the business? He said, you got to have the coin of the month. That's how you accumulate the points. That's how everybody in your downline accumulates points with memberships in the coin of the month. And that's how the business works, sharing the message. So I said, what do I need to do? He said, get in your back office and buy the wedge-tailed eagle. So this is the one coin that I will probably never sell, even if in my future I need to, because this is the first coin that I purchased at Chris's advice, and it's already gone up in value, and it's a beautiful collectible coin, wedge-tailed eagle from Australia mint. And so every month I get a variety coin, and the wife gets a silver eagle. So I started getting the coin of the month, and then it was just as easy when I introduced somebody the idea of 7K. I didn't need to teach them about it. I didn't need to sell them on what they needed to do. I shared a video with them. They watched the video. If they had more questions, they'd call me back, and then I'd get on a three-way call with Chris, and Chris would do all the talking. Until pretty soon I became comfortable enough to be able to talk to folks. And then as the people below me were trying to build their teams, they did the same thing. They just shared a video through their text or messaging or Facebook, and pretty soon their friends would be interested. So their friends would call them, and they'd say, Vince, I need to get on a three-way call so you can share the message with these folks. And then I'd talk about all the details. So they didn't really have to do anything till they became experienced in it. But there's 4 reasons I started collecting precious metals. The first reason was really to save a tangible asset. Like Chris talked about earlier, the paper dollar, the value of a paper dollar changes over time through inflation. 6% or more per year makes that dollar decrease in value, where at the same time, these precious metals do the opposite that the paper dollar does. And so it always maintains its value if it doesn't increase. And so that's the first thing. I wanted to have tangible assets. The second thing was I wanted to hedge for the economy. I talked about that, and I talked about COVID. COVID made people realize how important it was to have precious metals. And the precious metals, when people dived out of the stock market, jumped out of the stock market, they transferred all of that money into precious metals because they knew that's the best way to save it. So you saw this price increase in precious metals, and now it went from 14 when I first started buying, 14, 18, $19 an ounce. Now it went up to $27, $29 an ounce. And then you can't even buy some coins right now online because there's such a demand for precious metals that it's hard to find, but 7K has those things. Third reason was if I didn't need those precious metals, I'd be able to hand it down to my kids. The greatest thing about precious metals, let me give you an example. If I had a $400,000 house and I willed it to my children after my death and they got the house, well, they could turn around and sell it, but they'd have to pay capital gains on it. In other words, the government's going to reach into their pockets and pull a bunch of that money out. So really, I wasn't handing down what I had. I was handing down a portion of what I had. So the beauty of precious metals, if you get silver or gold eagles from the United States Mint, these are exempt from capital gains. In other words, any amount I can go and sell, it's not reportable or recordable. And so if I passed away, my wife could just take my bucket of precious metals out of the safe or dig it up from under the apple tree and back and hand it to my kids. They could take it to a coin shop and sell it without paying any taxes to the government. That's one of the beautiful things about precious metals. It's a real tangible asset that doesn't disappear. And I talked about 4 reasons. The real reason I started saving in precious metals is I want to take my family sailing. So next August, a little under a year, I'm going to be taking my family sailing. To be able to do that, I needed to save some money. I needed to get out of debt. I needed to pay all my bills, and I needed to save some money. My fear was that something like COVID, and it ended up happening, would come along and make whatever I had invested in or those dollars that I had worth a lot less. So for example, and I'm just going to tell you how much is in my safe and buried out in the apple tree and in the safe deposit box. But what I'm going to tell you is I'm just going to give you an example. And this kind of parallels what I experienced through this whole experience. I started squirreling away all these precious metals, a little bit a month. Remember, just something maybe $7 or $10 a month. to $25, $28 a month, and then pretty soon some tubes, and then a little bit of gold. Let's say I put that $5,000 worth of precious metals in my safe. And then something like COVID comes along, the economy crashes, superinflation happens because the government's printing billions more money to be able to help businesses get out of the hole. My precious metals, that $5,000, is now worth almost $10,000. So had I just kept that $5,000, the price of sailboats are going to go up through inflation. But the precious metals that I've set aside are going to accumulate at the same rate that inflation happens, at a minimum without a crisis. So that when I go to buy that sailboat, those paper dollars I set aside wouldn't be enough to be able to buy the sailboat. The precious metals I set aside, I'll liquidate back into cash at the time I buy the boat. And then now I've got enough cash to be able to pay for that boat. And so we have enough money now to pay for over half of the boat, and the other money I've been saving up in other assets, real estate and some other things are going to help pay for that journey. And so really this time next year, you guys are going to be seeing YouTube videos of Vince, his wife, and 3 girls sailing the Mediterranean, followed by the Caribbean. So you can make a bet on that. One other thing I wanted to share with you, a lot of people talk about, and Robert Kiyosaki's big in precious metals and real estate, a lot of people talk about real estate. And let me give you an example. A lot of us I can't afford to go out and pay $20,000 or $40,000 as a down payment on a modest home to be able to turn around and make that an investment property and be able to rent it out. And likewise, I can't go out and purchase 4 windows for a house, put those in the garage, and then buy a door the next month, put it in the garage, and then eventually 20 years later have enough to be able to build a house, to be able to have a rental house to do that. But you know what? I can put aside a set of windows every month. I can put aside some carpet every month in the form of precious metals. And as those metals continue to accumulate, some things I don't have to do that I'd have to do with real estate, I don't have to pay property tax on this. And again, I don't have to pay capital gains on this if I have to liquidate it into cash. And that's the beauty of precious metals. So I just want to thank you, Chris and Joe, not only for our camaraderie and being able to challenge each other when we see these things come on the market. And I'll tell you, every time I see one of these guys pick one of these coins up, I'm like, okay, yeah, now I got to have one, because this isn't just a pretty coin. This is 2.2 pounds of silver. So this is a good tangible asset to be able to invest in. And if I don't need it to turn it into cash as part of my investment portfolio, that's something I can pass down to the kids that they're really going to appreciate and love in the future. So again, Chris, I love you like a brother, and thanks so much for introducing me to 7K and giving me this opportunity to share my message. And I'm so thankful for my membership in 7K for almost 3 years now, and what it's done in helping me to get out of debt, make those weekly or monthly checks to be able to purchase more precious metals. And again, thanks so much, brother.